back to the explainer. So today we are diving into a narrative from ancient texts that is just deeply tragic, but also absolutely fascinating. It is a historical story that perfectly captures this rapid downward spiral of human stubbornness, rebellion, and what happens when we just flat out ignore clear instructions. As we go through this, you are going to see a cycle of human behavior that, honestly, might feel surprisingly relevant to how we operate today.
Hello everyone, this is TN Inside. Let's begin by reading today's scripture passage from the book of Jeremiah, chapters 42 to 45. Now this passage is going to take us on a seriously unpredictable ride. We are looking at that massive tension between what people say they are going to do and what they actually end up doing.
Section 1. The False Promise.
So, we start in chapter 42. The surviving commanders of the Israelite army come to the prophet Jeremiah and they make what sounds like a wonderfully pious vow. They promise to obey whatever the Lord would say through Jeremiah. Now, the irony here is just staggering. I mean, they are asking for a true compass to guide them, right? But behind the scenes, they were already harboring their own predetermined plans. They were not actually open to direction at all. They just wanted a divine rubber stamp for what they were already going to do.
After a really tense 10-day wait, God lays out two incredibly clear paths for them, and the outcomes are night and day. Option 1, stay in Judah. If they choose to stay, God literally promises they will live, they will not be uprooted, and they will be completely safe from the king of Babylon, who, by the way, they are absolutely terrified of. But then there is the alternative. Go to Egypt. If they disobey and run, the very things they are trying to outrun, like the sword, famine, and plague, those things are going to follow them right into Egyptian territory, and they will perish. It is really that stark.
Section 2. Defiance and Flight. Okay, remember that super pious promise of total obedience we literally just talked about? Well, here is their actual response to Jeremiah's message in chapter 43. They say, "He is lying. The Lord has not sent him to tell us not to go to Egypt." The contrast is just breathtaking. They basically asked for God's GPS and then threw it straight out the window the second it didn't route them to Egypt. When the guidance did not match the exact escape plan they wanted, they completely rejected it. And to rationalize this, they couldn't bring themselves to say God was wrong, so instead, they blamed Jeremiah's scribe, Baruch. They actually accused Baruch of tricking Jeremiah into delivering a fake message just to hand them over to the Babylonians. It is wild. Led by a guy named Johanan, they completely ignore the Lord's voice and march right down to Egypt anyway. And that terrible decision leads the group right to the city of Tahpanhes in Egypt, where God commands Jeremiah to perform a super vivid physical metaphor. Look at these steps. Step 1. Jeremiah is told to take these massive stones and bury them in the clay right at the entrance to the Pharaoh's house, right out in the open where everyone can see. Step 2. The prophecy declares that King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, yes, the exact same king they fled Judah to escape, is going to come and spread his royal tent directly over those exact buried stones. Step 3. He will kill many, burn the temples of Egypt's gods, and take people captive. And finally, Step 4. The Babylonians will depart safely. This sequence is this inescapable visual anchor for them. The message is painfully clear. That invasion you were so terrified of in Judah, it is going to meet you right here in Egypt.
Section 3. The Queen of Heaven.
Moving into chapter 44, the conflict just explodes into brazen, open idolatry. And the psychological rationalization happening here is incredible. Just take a look at these two totally opposing diagnoses for why disaster previously struck their home of Jerusalem. God's diagnosis is super clear. Jerusalem fell directly as a punishment for their continuous disobedience and burning of sacrifices to other gods. Simple, right? But the people's diagnosis? They have the audacity to claim that disaster struck precisely because they stopped pouring out offerings to a pagan deity known as the Queen of Heaven. They actually argue that back when they worshipped her, they had plenty of food and saw no disasters. It is a fascinating and deeply tragic look into their twisted logic. I mean, they looked at the exact same historical data and somehow came to the absolute opposite conclusion entirely just to justify their ongoing idolatry down in Egypt.
In response to this mind-boggling defiance, Jeremiah gives this almost bitterly ironic reply. He essentially tells them, fine, go ahead, keep fulfilling your vows to burn sacrifices to the Queen of Heaven. But in doing so, he totally cements their tragic reality. Because of these choices, God warns they will be completely destroyed by sword and famine. And just to prove that absolutely no one is out of reach, the text makes a point to note that even the Pharaoh of Egypt will be handed over to his enemies, exactly like King Zedekiah of Judah was. Their own stubbornness basically guaranteed the total destruction they originally ran away to avoid.
Section 4. A Promise to Baruch.
Now here in chapter 45, the narrative does something really unexpected.
It gives us this sudden, almost cinematic flashback to the year 605 BC. And this brilliantly illustrates the concept of thematic arrangement. That is, the literary practice of organizing a text by themes, arguments, or topics rather than strict chronological order. So chapter 45 isn't just some random add-on glued to the end of the story. By deliberately jumping back in time, the author is using Baruch's story as a thematic foil. It is perfectly positioned here to contrast one individual's personal obedience against the massive corporate disaster and rebellion we literally just witnessed in Egypt. In this thematic flashback, we get a really raw window into the heavy emotional toll of this ministry. We see Baruch lamenting that the Lord had added sorrow to his pain and that he could find no rest. Remember, Baruch was Jeremiah's scribe. He was right there in the trenches, sharing deeply in Jeremiah's grief and suffering. He bore this incredible emotional burden of delivering highly unpopular messages to a fiercely stubborn people. And honestly, it is pretty clear he struggled with having to abandon his own personal ambitions just to faithfully fulfill God's calling. He was exhausted. He was distressed. He was just completely worn out.
But the crucial point here is a deeply personal promise from God to his exhausted servant. God speaks to Baruch directly, telling him not to seek great things for himself, because everything that has been planted is about to be uprooted. But right in the middle of this impending national disaster, God gives him a beautiful assurance. Baruch will be preserved as if he were a prized possession taken from the battlefield. God is promising Baruch that while the whole nation might crumble because of its stubbornness, his individual faithfulness has been seen, and his life will be spared. It is a really powerful beacon of divine faithfulness shining right through a very dark, rebellious story.
All of this leaves us with a question that echoes from the ancient clay of Egypt all the way into our modern lives. When our plans clash with our faith, do we actually seek God's guidance, or are we just looking for his permission? The people of Judah just wanted a rubber stamp for their own stubborn desires, and they rationalized their way right into a tragedy. Meanwhile, Baruch surrendered his personal ambitions, embraced obedience, and was wonderfully preserved. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope unpacking this historical text has brought the narrative to life for you and given you something to think about. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I will see you next time.